Hello and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to yet another session of Inspiring Conversation. Yes, it's Thursday again, and we have a great guest on this show today. But as usual, let's go through why Inspiring Conversations are here. So it's all about creating conversations that really matter. We're diving into ways to connect deeply, break down barriers, and build moments that inspire trust and growth. Whether it is with your team at work or in your everyday chats, we will bring more positivity, realness, and impact into every conversation. And as always, I am live from Kópavogur in Iceland. Kópavogur is the second largest city in Iceland, and I live close to the sea. And when I say second largest city in Iceland, I am talking about 40,000 people. So we are like a village in the other big places in the world. So today, but I will also remind you, check Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and to see other sessions, because we have had some great ones, and today will be no exception, because my guest today is an author, and he was a CNN news reporter. He's a veteran. He has done so much, and I couldn't even choose a book to show you, like a book cover, but we can talk about that because he is here, and his name is John Dedakis. Hello and good morning to you, sir.
Hello, Hedden. Good to be with you. Thank you.
So how's life in cold Baltimore? I was going to say Alaska, but then I remembered, no, it was not Alaska, it was
Yeah.
Baltimore.
It's Baltimore, Maryland. It's in the 20s today. It's a lot colder than it usually is. We still
Yeah.
have about a foot of snow on the ground, and that's unusual too. We get snow usually once a year, but the snow is sticking around for a while.
Yes. And I can tell you, people, we have been talking about this because it's 5th of February 5th. And here in Iceland, there is not a snow in sight. And the temperature is, what did we say, 36 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
Two
it's
degrees.
warmer. It is warmer in Iceland right now than it is in
Yeah.
Baltimore, Maryland.
So 2 degrees Celsius. And we figured out that minus 20, no, 20 degrees Fahrenheit is minus 7 Celsius.
Something like that, yeah.
So eat that, people in Baltimore. So, John, you have had a hell of a life.
I've,
So, and I mentioned that you were working at CNN was that in the good old days when when CNN was starting, or give us a little bit taster of your life,
Sure.
because
I started at CNN in 1988, about 8 years after CNN started, and it was the year that it was right. Well, no, it wasn't. Let's see. Let me just think. CNN actually became more globally known in about 1990 during the first Gulf War, when we had
uh,
three reporters on the ground and they were able to report live when the war started. And all the other Western journalists had left. And so CNN was basically the go to news organization for war coverage. And so, there wasn't any Fox News. It was CNN was the first 24-hour news network.
mm,
Journalism has changed a lot since then, but I started there in '88 as a writer, became an editor, and retired in 2013 after 25 years, the last 7 as one of Wolf Blitzer's editors.
so I remember the day, like when the war in Iraq started. No, it was in Kuwait.
Kuwait.
and there was a live coverage from CNN, and
Right.
we got it here in Iceland, and it was almost like yeah, do we want to have pop and coke? Like it's just like
I know.
bonkers that we all of a sudden could watch like the bombs, and it was just like out of this world. So uh,
Right.
now you were just like, oh no, 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 we don't want to see that.
Right. Yep.
It's just like, ugh. But we mentioned also, we talked about before we came on that you were a veteran, and you, dare I say, were you lucky that you never went all the way over to Vietnam, or
I was
because
very lucky. I was very
yeah,
lucky because they had a draft back in that era. This would have been in the late, probably about 1969, 1970. And if you had
yeah,
a number below 150, you were going to Vietnam. My number was 14. And it didn't look good, but
uh,
at the last minute, 2 weeks before I was to ship out, my orders were changed to Germany, and I was stationed at the American Forces Radio and Television Network in Frankfurt, Germany, AFN, doing interviews for a special events radio unit. And the first interview I was assigned to do was with Alfred Hitchcock. I know.
oh my. Did you
That's what
wet
I
yourself when you like? Did you wet yourself when you met him? Because like that guy,
Oh, very intimidating. It was a very
yeah,
intimidating experience, but he was very welcoming, very affable. We spent 40 minutes one-on-one, and it was a life-changing experience because up until that time, I was planning to go into law with my dad, who was a lawyer, and then use the law as a stepping stone to get into politics. But this was a the beginning of a transition to journalism because I had found what I was good at and what I loved, and when you
yeah,
put those 2 things together, you've got the purpose and propulsion to go forward with your life.
yeah. But it's funny how because as I mentioned, I talked to Rand Timmerman, who was 80 years old when I like last when I talked to him, or he is 80 years old, and he took the Appalachia Trail at
Mm,
the age of 72, and
wow.
he was a veteran, and he went to Vietnam, and he like every decision he took, it was just like based on being drunk or being hangover. And when he decided to join the Corps or Marine or whatever you call it, he was hangover, sleeping on a pool table in some bar, wherever, and he heard on the radio there was some person came in and was going to clean the bar and turned on the radio, and he heard like, "Oh, the Navy needs you," and he was just like, "Yeah, I'm going to join the army." Like I was just like, "What?"
Yeah, wow.
That's a huge
That's a big
decision.
decision, yeah.
And his first encounter in Vietnam was when there was something like he was being introduced where the barracks were where they were supposed to sleep or like all that. And then all of a sudden they heard this big loud noise, and everybody fell to the ground. And then
Mhm.
they found out that there was this soldier who got a stack of letters from home. And of course, they went through and found the letter from his fiancee. And in that letter, the fiancé said, "Oh, I met another man. I'm cutting off the engagement with you because I got engaged with him, and we got married yesterday." And he took
Oh
up
my god.
his gun and just like. So I was just like, "What?" I would have gone home that day.
Yeah, oh man, that happens a lot. They call those
So,
Dear John letters.
yeah, it's hard. Like it's just, and I was just like, you know, when you meet you guys who have experienced this, it's just like striking a gold mine.
Yeah,
The knowledge and the wisdom, or what you have seen or what you have done, because me growing up, I didn't understand this. I was just like 10 years old or something when it stopped, and you know, it was just like, well, what is this debacle, like why is this, and la 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 la. And
right.
then you see the movies, and it's always the heroes that live, but it's not the case. So it's so valuable to get the story like
Right.
from the horse's mouth, isn't it?
It is, it really is, yeah.
Yeah. But Before we dive in, I just want to say to people who are watching, if there is there anyone out there, then if you have a question, just post it on LinkedIn, and maybe it will show up here. I will post it on the screen. So our topic today with John is when life writes the story for you and why writing what hurts helps. So
Ooh,
you have, as I mentioned, you have written a lot of books, and they are
6.
all, well, that's a lot. That's six more than I have. Uh, so you told me that they are fiction, but you always, like, you weave in something that does happen.
Yes.
And but you have, well, not to say, so say it politely, like you have a loss of your sister and your own son due
Right.
to narcotics. So did it become, like, how did you go from to that
Mm.
path? Like, when is it that, like, you were in CNN and you were traveling maybe all over and just like do, and then all of a sudden it's just like shit happens, as we say,
Mhm.
and then you just like, okay, what the heck? What am I to do? How can I cope with this? So
Mhm.
give us a little bit, like, the transition.
Sure. Thank you. It's a process that evolves.
Yeah.
And I teach people how to write novels, and one of the things I teach is that it's important for us all as individuals, as human beings, to realize that life doesn't turn out the way you expect. In journalism,
Hmm.
it's a story. In real life, it's often a crisis. And in fiction, it's a plot twist. And we all have plot twists, things that happen that are unexpected. And in my case, what really fueled the 6 novels that I've written goes all the way back to when I was 9 years old. I witnessed a car train collision that killed 3 people, including a kid my age, and that
Oy.
was the very first time that I felt personally impacted psychologically and emotionally about my mortality, because life can change and end in a second. And so that stuck with me, but I didn't do any writing. I actually did do some writing about it initially, but not to be a writer, just to kind of capture the experience. 15 years later, maybe even more than that, in 1980, my sister took her life. Carbon monoxide poisoning. I was on the scene that day. But again, I was a reporter at a local radio station in Madison, Wisconsin, and uh, and I didn't go through any grief counseling or anything like that. I was a journalist. I was not a novelist. Then, going forward, I became, as I mentioned earlier, a writer at CNN in 1988. And it wasn't until, this is a plot twist, it wasn't until they made me an editor that I discovered that that was tedious. It paid well, but it wasn't creative. I needed something that was more creative. And so that's when I started to play around with writing fiction, making it up. And so um, I was starting to do writing exercises that would help me discover what my story was going to be. And one of the things I teach in my writing classes is what I call the spooky power of the subconscious. Because
Hmm.
as I was doing this writing exercise about the car train collision that I witnessed, I remembered a radio news report that I heard a week after the accident happened that I witnessed. And it was 40 years later that I was writing this account down of what happened to me. And I was remembering this story about a car train collision in which an infant survived. And I began to play what if? What if that infant grew up and wanted to know more about her past, wanted to know about her father? And so that was the beginning of Fast Track, which became my first novel. So I incorporated the car train collision. I incorporated my sister's suicide and created a story and a character who is now dealing with grief. And since all 6 of my novels are a series with the same protagonist, grief and loss are part of her identity. And so when my fourth novel came along, I was I had already dealt with the death of my youngest son of an accidental heroin overdose in 2011. So by this time, I did go through grief counseling. And what I've discovered is that there's a certain degree of, I don't know, I think it's healthy for a person, especially a writer, to mine the pain, to get to know yourself and then use that pain as grist for your fiction. It's a way of it's a way of processing thing. It's therapeutic. It can be a catharsis. And so that's now a lot of what I teach in my writing classes and a lot of what I speak about to different organizations, helping people, even a person who's not a writer has still experienced grief and loss. And it doesn't even mean the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a pet, a job, your innocence, a relationship. And the writing about those things, mining the pain, can be a way of getting toward healing. And so that's kind of where I am right now. And it's been a process. It's been an evolution over
Mhm.
the last, many decades.
But how is it? Do you remember when you saw the collision at the age of 9?
Mhm.
Like you just watched it. Did you get like paralyzed, or did you go home and say like I saw this thing, or did you say nothing at all, or because because it's the guy thing. We are
Yeah,
not allowed to cry, and we are not allowed
sure.
this, and probably back then this as a showing emotion. Forget it. There must be something wrong with you.
The accident happened. I was in a dome car that was on the train near the front of the train, but my position was elevated so I could see ahead. And
Yeah,
and a
yeah.
car came out of nowhere and crossed in front of us, and we hit, and the debris came down, and that was emotional. And I did cry, afterwards, not at the time, but 9-year-olds, they're less inhibited emotionally.
Mm,
But the point you're making, especially about guys being, more, trying to keep it in, to be tough. I've
mm,
discovered over the years, especially having gone through grief counseling, that it's really important, I think, to process your grief. And it's especially important, I think, for men to go through grief counseling and to be able to be comfortable with sharing their emotions, because not sharing doesn't mean you're not dealing with it. It's just that, in my experience, it's the women in my life who are able to cry, and that's an emotional safety valve. And for
mm,
those of us who keep it bottled up because we're trying to be strong, it's just corrosive. It's just eating us up from the inside. And
mm,
so, in most extreme cases, if you think about it, mass murderers, mass shooters are guys. And I think it's because, and this again is an extreme example, they have probably unprocessed grief and anger to the point where the tears become bullets. And
mm,
so I think that it really is important for men especially to be able to process that pain, and
mm.
write a book, maybe, or put it in a journal, or write a poem, whatever it is, but share the feelings with someone who's a professional, who can help you navigate that, because it can be so um, bewildering when you're going through those intense emotions.
Yeah, and remember, it's not a loss. Like you are not losing anything by talking to a counselor or whatever. It's not has nothing. You are not crazy. You are not this or that. Like whatever society, like you think society says,
Yeah,
it is primarily to help yourself. Because, as you mentioned, like a 9-year-old, and according to the psychology studies, you are discovering your immortality.
right.
So, but you did not show after that, like when you were, and then when you got to be teenager, you did not get like. And I need to this, and I need to fight, and I go, don't like mess with me. I'm John Dedakis.
I wasn't that kind of a guy. I mean,
No,
because I
no.
was a skinny, scrawny kid, I would have been beaten up. I used humor to
Ah,
diffuse the
ooh,
situation.
we two are alike.
Yeah.
But we have our first comment or first question. Like
Oh,
Rap Bestie, my good friend from the UK, does happiness also work as well as sharing personal pain? Personal pain.
phew. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so you're not going to be getting an expert opinion. I think there's a
No.
difference. I think there's a difference between happiness and joy. I think joy is much deeper. Happiness, I think, is more superficial. Um, I think that I think that sharing your pain can lead to a sense of happiness and even joy because I think once it's out there, once you've had a chance to analyze it, it isn't quite as you're able to look at it, I think, a little more objectively. And, it's important, I think, to feel the emotions, but once they've been processed and dealt with, and it's an ongoing process, I think that that can free you up so that you're not just stuck in this dark place. My
But it
two
also
cents.
must it must also must be like when you are your weight, like it goes off your shoulder, and you just you
There's
get the endorphins or whatever it's called, like so you can be smile or like get this, oh, I'm alive feeling.
there's actually a light bulb moment that I had when I was in grief counseling, and it's a safe place. And about 5 months into this 2.5 year relationship, I said to my grief counselor, "There's something I need to tell you, and the only two people I've ever told this to are dead." And she flinched, and I said, "That's not why they're dead." And once
John,
I
don't
know.
kill me.
I know. And once I told her though, there was this feeling of relief. It was like a
Yeah,
major burden was lifted. And ever since then, what I told her, I'm not going to tell you, thank you, but it put it in perspective. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that then enabled me, I think, to be a little bit more easygoing about life.
Well, yeah, you could went out. Like it is just like it's okay to say, but you have to have it in a secure, like the
It
psychology,
was a
like
safe place. It was
psychological safety and stuff. But Rap, he has another question, or he says like, I'm sure there are loads of repetitive questions about your work, but what is the one question you wish they would ask about your work? He is
That's a
so
really
deep. I
good
told
question.
you.
I
Yeah, I
mean, are
told
we
you he's
talking?
deep.
Are we talking about journalism or are we talking about writing?
No, I
I'm
think
gonna.
he's talking about the grief and your work as like writing grief and stuff, isn't it?
Oh, because
Well,
I was
rap.
going to say about journalism. I wish people would ask more about objectivity and can it be
Yeah.
achieved as a journalist. As far as writing is concerned, I get a lot of questions about writing, and I can't think of anything that really hasn't been asked that I think should be, because people ask me about the process, they ask me about the business, and so because I've been teaching for like 20 years, I can't think of a question I haven't been asked yet about writing. But if
But
he's
do
got one,
people? Well, yes, rap. If you have another, if you have a question that you want to ask
I
me,
think
but
he's
my,
typing. Look, he's gone
yeah,
away. I think he's typing.
I just thought like, will I ever be normal again?
Sure. What's
Like,
normal?
yeah, yeah,
Do you
yeah,
really?
but
Yeah.
it's because you when you have something so buried in you, like I'm a child of an alcoholic, it's just like when I realized that I was not alone
Yeah. Yeah.
at a certain age, like, oh, because you think that this is the norm, and then
Right.
you meet another one who is like, oh, oh, your father is much worse alcoholic than my father. Well,
Yeah.
I'm the lucky one, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like it's just, but and it's funny to say it because I think one of my best friend, I think we were 18 or something. Then he said, "What? Was your father alcoholic?" Because I never invited anybody home when he was drunk.
Right.
Because I was ashamed, and
Sure.
the denial and the codependence, and then when I decided to just spur it out, my father was just like, "Do you have to be so cruel?" Well, I said, like, "Why? You were drunk, and you were drunk most of my life."
Mm,
Okay, maybe I was a little bit harsh, but like, let's not dwell on that. Let's keep on talking together about grief. But okay, then you are 24 years old and you have started your journey as a reporter.
right.
But either way, like if I calculated it correctly, like 15 years later after the train collision, then you lost your sister.
Right.
And what then? Were you so focused on that you were a journalist that you just pushed it away, or did you not give a tear? Did you share a tear, or did you like?
Sure.
Do you remember how
Yes,
you?
I do. I can remember after she died, we had to go to the funeral parlor before the viewing, and I saw
Yeah,
her dead. I saw her dead before they had really, prettied her up. And I mean, I just started crying uncontrollably. It
yeah.
just welled up suddenly. I'd never experienced something like that before. And it was a little frightening, to be honest, but my wife was with me and she was very comforting and supportive. Um, so yeah, it's not that I was unable to cry, but um, it just took a while to sort things out and to move forward. And you make a very good observation about journalism, because journalists are trained to put their emotions aside, and we
Yeah.
almost compartmentalize our emotions. And I think that's probably one reason why I'm more able to talk about my son's death and my sister's death, because I'm just able to be factual about it. I mean, if you get me off script, I might be in trouble. But there are certain parts of the story
Yeah.
I'm able to tell factually. But if you dig more deeply, all bets are off.
But okay, I'm just lost for words that you were married at the age of 24.
No, I was married at 27, 28.
Oh,
So
but
my
your
sister,
wife.
no, I was my sister died in when I was 30.
Oh, I thought that you
That
were.
was
I thought it
1980.
was when you were 24. Yeah. So she died in 1980.
That's right. And I was 30 then. So I'm old now.
Well, I don't know about that. If you were 30 in 1980. Yeah, you were old. I was 13.
Okay.
I
We
really had
agree.
to. Yeah, thank you. But were your parents alive at that point? Like, did they
I
like?
had
Did
to
your
be,
father? Did your
yeah.
father show grief when your sister died? Like,
It was my job to tell my parents that my sister was dead.
oh my.
And that was the hardest phone call I ever made. They were, 150 miles away, and I actually made the call with my sister dead at my feet, and had to, my parents often would get on. There were two phones in the house, so my dad would get on one extension and my mom on the other. And they had been, when I called, it was a Saturday morning. They were having breakfast together in the kitchen, and I said, I need to talk to you both. So dad needs to get on the extension. And as he was going into the other room, my mom just knew. She said, "It's about Georgia, isn't it?" And I said, "We need to talk. I mean, I'm going to wait till dad gets on the line." And I when I told them it was me being in reporter mode, I basically said, "Brace yourselves. Georgia's dead." I mean, and
Mm,
and in journalism, we don't mess around with euphemisms like passed away or is in a better place. Dead is the norm when you're reporting
mm-hmm,
on something like that. And they both reacted immediately. My dad said, "Oh no," and my mom just said, "Keep talking. Just tell me everything." And so I just told her what had happened. And um, sure, I've seen both of my parents cry. My dad was in World War II, My mom told me that he cried for a week after he came back from Germany, and and I did an oral history with my dad, and I'd heard the war stories, but in the interview I did with him, he broke down and cried because he talked about the last time he was with my mom before he shipped out, and he said she was so strong. They stayed up all night talking. They didn't know
Mm.
if they would ever see each other again. And I think she's the only one he ever told everything to. For the most part, he kept it in, but he had a sense of humor. And so we all deal with things differently. And so
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
But
sorry about that.
no, 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 no. This is why you are inspiring, and that is because you are open. But because my father, he was born in 1929, and I had a stepbrother. Uh, my mother and father, they adopted. Well, they took care of my father's brother's child, uh, where his mother died 6 days after his birth, and
Mm.
because they had a toddler. Yeah, why not? Like, and it was just like, yeah, well, you do that. But when he died in 1985, that is, that is my brother or stepbrother. I always called him my brother because he was 13 years older than me. It was like it was just an end of an era. It was
Yeah.
just like, yeah, he's died, and then just box him and put him
Mm.
away.
Yeah.
And the only time when he was mentioned was, what do you think your brother would say today if he saw what you were doing?
Oh my.
And I would look
Yes.
at my father, because I am like, I just say what I like. Sometimes I get in trouble. I got in trouble for that. And I just looked at him and said, "Well, I don't know because we never talk about him. Because he had, back in the '85 when the funeral was, we tape recorded cassette, good old days, and he had the cassette and played it in his car whenever he felt." And I knew that because sometimes I took the cassette out of the cassette player in the car. So he dealt with the group, but he never told anybody.
Privately, he dealt with it privately, right?
Yeah, but and it was just like, why can't we just talk about it?
Right.
What's the problem?
Yeah, look, everybody grieves differently. And there was a time when my
Yeah.
wife and I, after our son died, we were together maybe a couple of months after he died, and we were in the car, and there was a CD player or CD on, and a song came on, and Cindy hit the button to advance it to the next track. And I remember saying, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "Every time I hear that song, it makes me cry." It was the
Mm,
same song that when I heard it, I would hit repeat, so I'd play it over and over again because it
yeah,
made me
yeah,
cry. It was the
yeah,
same song, same emotional reaction, but we dealt with it differently. And I
yeah,
think that's probably why we're still together after 48 years, because we just knew instinctively that we weren't going to be able to fix each other. We both
yeah,
went our separate ways as far as grief counseling is concerned. And we just knew that, comparing our grief and our recovery to each other was a non-starter. Snap out of it isn't real,
yeah,
helpful. And you're not doing it right isn't going to,
mm,
cause the marriage to survive.
yeah. And we have to talk to each other.
Yeah.
This is like basically like if we don't do that,
Yeah.
then
And
we
I mean,
lose.
she and I can still talk about Stephen, and, he comes up frequently, but we don't necessarily we don't emote about it with each other because we have our own support systems.
So Rab again. He says, "Is there a mistake that you made in your early days of writing
Yeah.
that you would ask your people to avoid? Like,
Sure.
is there like how? Okay, you can teach a certain thing, but is there a right one or a wrong one, or like? like
There,
you get the question. You get
I
like,
do, I do.
is there something that we should avoid if we start writing our story?
Oh, that's actually a really good practical question on all counts. Um, I mean, I'm stunned at the early draft of Fast Track and how pretentious it was. It was, and yet I've learned a lot over the years about the writing process and what it takes to be traditionally published. And one of the things I've learned is that there's no one right way to do it. There are a gazillion ways to tell a story. But one of the things I've discovered in the last 2 years or so is I've gone to a lot of writing conferences where agents share their secrets about what makes the difference between whether they'll accept a manuscript for publication or not. And one of the things that keeps popping up is that these agents that I've met will often reject a manuscript based on the first couple of pages, which of course seems a little unfair if you've written 80,000 words and someone is going to make a decision based on the first couple of hundred words. But what ends up happening is that these agents get pitched 150 times a day. They read so many things, they already know what works and what doesn't. And often, what rookie writers do is they throw backstory into the very first pages instead of getting the actual story started. And so,
Yeah.
what you want to do is make your characters intriguing and make the reader want to keep turning pages to learn more about them and the story, as opposed to front loading it with all kinds of background that we don't know is important yet or not. Get the actual story started, and then you can sprinkle the backstory in throughout the story as it unfolds. So that's probably one of the prime mistakes that people make, other than
Mm.
just giving up. I think a lot of people give up prematurely because they are either overwhelmed by the process or don't think they're any good.
But I think, if I remember correctly, I think my wife did that. Like, if she didn't like the book she was reading after the first set of page, she just like, no, no.
Yeah,
Whereas,
yeah. Life's too short.
whereas I would just go through it and say like, what a lame shit ass of a
Right.
book this is, and she was just like, I could have told you after 3 pages.
Right.
Well, I'm thick. I'm thick.
Well, you want to give the writer a chance, give
Yes.
them a chance.
It's the same as in movies. Like, people talk about, yeah, they'll just leave the theater. Like, no, I paid for the ticket. I will
Exactly.
see it through the end. I will suffer to the end, and then I can say, "Oh my God, that is 90 minutes that I will never ever get again."
Exactly.
But let's like go into then the heartbreaking story of your son.
Mm,
Like, we are talking about 2011. You have grown. You have seen stuff. You have encountered loads of maybe bad stuff in your life because you were a reporter and you just like put it there and there, like that you have your filing system as you do.
mhm.
But then you get the kids, and they are the most precious thing that you will ever get, no matter what, and you will do anything for them. And I guess that you had more than him, or
Yeah, Steven's the youngest. Emily is the oldest. She was 8 years older than Steve. And James, my middle kid, is he was 5 years older than Steven.
okay, so but and it must be devastating. Like this for me, I have twins and they are 25.
Mhm.
And I'm just, my mind always wanders if they go abroad or if they go on a camping tour or whatever. You're just like, call me,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
sign in, like,
Yeah,
call me.
let us know you're alive. And that's not an
Yes.
idle question.
No, because when I was growing up, I was just like, oh, why? Like, that I'm fine. And I was just like, so, like, why are you spying on me? And then they say it as well. And just like, no. But like, in 2011, you have done a loads of stuff. You have encountered loads of stuff. And this is probably the ultimate, like, this is the most devastating thing ever. So how was it? Like, did you find him, or did you get the call, or like, was it vice? Like, was it like
Sure.
because you told that you had to call your parents when your sister died? So
Yeah.
now you get the call, and you had to like have it on speaker, or like, how did you receive,
Sure. Well,
and what happened?
in this case, Stephen and I were living together. My wife was working in Philadelphia, and I would go up and see her on weekends. And so Stephen was working as a cook at a high-end restaurant in DC, and our schedules were not synced, so we were like ships passing in the night. And
Yeah.
a month before he died, he had an emergency room situation where his left arm went numb. He wasn't able to use it. And so he went to the emergency room, and I came back from Philadelphia and was with him. And when I got to the hospital, he was 22 at the time. And the nurses said to me, "We are very worried about your son, but we can't tell you why because there were privacy laws in effect
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
adult." And so I went to him and I said, "Dude, you know what's going on. They know what's going on. I don't. And I'm one of the people who can help you." And he said, "Well," he didn't really tell me, but he had to have some tests done. And so we had to stay in the emergency room for a while. And at the time that they finally released him from the hospital, he called me into the room with the doctor and gave me his release papers. And they said, "Stop using heroin." And I'm going, "What the fuck?"
Oh, what a, yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so he and I had a heart-to-heart conversation. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't kick him out of the house, but I wanted to understand. Help me understand what's going on here. Long story short, he felt he was depressed, and that's one of the reasons why he was using. He said he claimed that he had only tried it a few times and I can manage it. Well, he tried to meet with the psychologist.
Hmm.
The guy's schedule was full, and they said, "Call back in 2 weeks." And a week later, Stephen went missing. He borrowed my car and was off the grid for a week. And this was out of character for him. We had no idea where he was, why he was gone. And we went and filed a missing persons report, mobilized friends and everybody to go on a search. And I kind of had a feeling that heroin was going to be involved.
Mm.
And as it turned out, his friends started to come forward, and I actually went searching for him with a girl that he used to shoot up with. And we went to where he used to buy drugs and where they would go and shoot up, looking for him. We couldn't find him. And on the day that we got the word, we had launched a major search. We had coordinated our friends and launched a search party for him. And it was the same day that he was found, dead in my car, a block and a half from our house in D.C., dead of a heroin overdose. And the way I found out is the police found the car, found the body, but they hadn't been able to make an identification yet. And so the detectives came to our house and they sat us down in the living room and told us what I just told you. We found the car, we have a body. And my wife and my son James were there. They fell apart. And I went into reporter mode. I asked, "Was any drug paraphernalia found?" And they said, "Yes. A bottle of alcohol, some cotton swabs, and yeah." And just as was the case when my sister died, when the cops told me, when I got to the scene, you know, I said I have to see her, and they let me go
Hmm.
be with her. And I said, I have to go to the scene. And they told me where it was. But in this case, they told me I had to stay on the other side of the yellow police tape. But I went and I took a picture. I took pictures. I'm in reporter mode. It's weird how I worked
Mm.
it. But my wife and my son's James had just fallen apart, understandably. And I dealt with it just getting the facts and just in a sense keeping vigil. Um, and then eventually I had to return to the house and be with Cindy. But It wasn't until that he went to the morgue. I wasn't able to make an identification on the scene. They weren't allowing that. And so James and I went to the morgue, and that's where I made the identification. And that was awful. I cried then, and cried a couple of times, and anger too, because when we knew that the detectives were coming to the house, as they were coming up the steps, I that was the moment when I knew he was dead, and my gut reaction was anger, and I slammed my hand against the door frame of his room, and then I dialed it back because I knew anger was not going to be my friend, and so anger is something that I've wrestled with over the years. And fortunately, I had an experience when I was 5 years old and had my parents wouldn't let me wear my tennis shoes to school, to the kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And so to punctuate my anger, I hit the door, which had a plate glass window. And I sliced my finger. It was arterial bleeding. I almost bled to death. And so at a very young age, I knew that even though I have anger issues, I better not give free rein to my anger, because that can be devastating. It can be life altering. So, again, humor is my default. That's my default mechanism. And in journalism, there's dark humor. And that's
That is,
true. It's true in
yeah.
military, in EMTs. It's a safety valve. Is humor?
Dark humor is everywhere where there is hardship. But I'm so sorry for your loss. But now,
Yeah.
15 years later on, like, or if I can do the math, like without the Google sheet or whatever it is called, like 15 years ahead,
Yeah.
where, like, do you, or maybe let's start with this question, like, when it happened and
Mhm.
when time passed, a year went, or did you ever go through and then, oh, I could have done this differently when he was growing up, or like, did you both
Oh,
go through this, like,
sure.
why didn't we do this and that? Because if you
Yes.
have a James that who is like good guy or whatever, like, I don't know, like, I'm babbling now because I'm just trying to get out of this emotion, because it's
Yeah.
just like horrible. It's just like, as I mentioned, like, it's horrible to watch your own kid die,
Yeah. Yeah.
or go through this. And
Sure.
did you both go through this, like, could we have done, like, we could have, should
Yes.
have, would have?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, if you want to judge me as a parent, get in line, because I got there first. And so, sure, guilt is, I think, a primary emotion. And I won't speak for Cindy, but it certainly came up in my grief counseling sessions. And my grief counselor was heroic in helping me not to wallow in my grief, in my guilt, because that can't change it. I can't change anything. Look, heroin is highly addictive, and
Yeah.
he made the choice to take a
Mm.
highly addictive drug. And so, he has some of the responsibility, but then of course, addiction takes over, and you are almost you're doing things that intellectually you shouldn't do, but you're compelled to do them. And so, I think addiction is something that you can't blame an addict for being an addict. I think that's a disease, and I think that there's a lot that we still need to understand about how to get beyond it. But um, I think guilt can be counterproductive. It can be valuable to help you think, more humbly and self-critically, but it can be a trap. Uh,
Mm.
and I think forgiveness, you have to be able to forgive yourself. I think you need to be able to forgive the person who killed themselves or who became an addict, because they did things that were maybe antisocial or mean, or whatever. So life is filled with guilt and pain, and yet it can be such a crippler. And I think we need to find ways to get beyond it, because we spend all our time regretting the past, that we can't change and
Mm,
fearing the future that's not here yet, really the only thing we have control over is this moment right here. And if we are in control of it in a constructive way, then that means we can have a constructive impact on our future and on the future of other people as well if we're
mm.
effective in the moment.
But how is it? Because here in Iceland, there have been several similarity, like young guys dying because of overdoses and everything, and every time news or they are on telly or whatever, they say the system failed. And
Mhm.
in your case, like your son's case, he if he would have had the counseling from the psychologist, but
Sure,
that was in a month or in a like how, and then comes up the anger towards the system. How did you
sure.
like get
And
rid of
it's not,
that?
it's I just made a choice. Dealing with your anger, and blaming people, that's a choice that you make.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, if anything, I blame the pusher. In fact, the fourth novel I wrote, the title of the book is Bullet in the Chamber. And the cover picture is a bullet in a syringe. And the reason that I titled it that and wrote it is that I felt that if the police could make the connection between the fatal drug dose and the pusher, that they should charge the pusher with second degree murder because it's the equivalent of selling a pistol with one bullet in the chamber
Uh,
to someone you know is going to play Russian roulette and you don't care. But what I discovered in my research is that it's not that easy for the cops to make that case because often the pushers who don't necessarily take the drugs, so they're not addicts, they will recruit addicts to actually complete the sale. And that makes it all the more difficult to charge the
yeah.
person who's really to blame for anything.
So did your writing, because you said that when did you start? Is it 20 years ago where you started publishing your books?
Right.
So after his death, like did it then grow even more, and you were just like more determined to, because well, I can't understand people who just want to do this, and this sentence, well, I can control it. No,
Yeah.
you can't.
Right.
Nobody does. People
Right.
die.
Oh my God.
No, I
Yeah.
will not. And it sometimes it only take one tablet, and then
Oh my God.
the
Yeah.
body just says like, "Oh, what's
That's it.
this? I don't like it."
Right. Right. That's
It's
it.
just like
That's it.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I like, so we have to move on because time flies when you're okay. Okay, yeah,
We're
it's a
having
good
fun. We're having
conversation.
fun. This is
We're
good
having
fun.
fun, and it's a good conversation. So my friend here in Iceland, he says he asked in grief counseling, how important is the performance and input from the consultant? Is the most important part to simply listen actively, or are there important questions and
Ooh.
contributions from the counseling person? So, is the grief counselor, is he or she or the person, are they like coaches? Like, do they open up? Like, do they bring questions that are open, or you have to like, oh,
Well,
you're grieving.
this is a
Stop
wonderful
this.
question. This is a wonderful question because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't understand what goes on in counseling. And I think a lot of men, again, I don't want to generalize, but I think a lot of people who don't go to counseling have this feeling that they're going to be told what to do. They're going to be said, well, this is the problem with you. You're crazy and you need to do this, that, and the other thing. And I think, based on my experience, and again, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a trained professional, but I've been on the
At the
receiving end
receiving end, yes,
of
yes.
of being in a counseling situation, and my grief counselor, wasn't prescriptive. She wasn't telling me what to do. She was giving me permission to tell her what was going on. And the goal in counseling is to help you get your own inner clarity. And this is true whether you're grieving the loss of a loved one or if you're deciding whether or not to leave a marriage. It's the counselor's job to help you understand yourself, understand the consequences of your choices, and help you come to inner clarity about what you should do. And they are there to help and support you as you go forward. And that was, you know, the reason I stopped going to grief counseling is after 2.5 years, she said to me, "You don't need me anymore because you're asking yourself the right questions in your journal and you're
Mm.
dealing with them there." And so she felt that I was, able to navigate my life successfully without her guiding me along the way. We still are friends, we still keep in touch, but it's a friend relationship. It's not a counseling relationship anymore.
Mm. But regarding the generalization, you can tell people that a guy from Iceland said to you that you're allowed to generalize and say that men are idiots when it comes to counseling.
Well, I'll tell you, just about
I think
every woman I know who's ever talked to me about the guys that they've dated, basically come away with the conclusion that men are idiots. There was one woman
yes.
who took one of my classes. She was writing a book on 100 first dates or something like that, and I asked her, "Is there a pattern here?" And she said, "Men do not know how to have a conversation with a woman. It's all about them, their bank accounts, and they don't ask questions. They don't care about me. I'm just their audience."
So it's not about then the decision is that they have tiny. No, that was not. I thought I had seen the picture like the movie. I'm horrible, aren't I?
Don't know where you're going with this. Is this
No, thank
wrapping
you.
around the little finger? Is that
Yeah.
the yeah.
But my friend here, he says also, like now in Iceland, we have the sober week this week, and
Why
a
just a
week.
week?
Well, I think it's maybe like as he says, a week dedicated to alcohol misuse, and I think it's just about the awareness. It's always about the awareness because like you don't want to. If it was every other day or every day because you watch
Sure.
the news and it's
Then you get
negative and
numb. Then
you
you get numb
yeah,
to it.
yeah, and then it's just like, well, people die, it doesn't matter. So how big part do you think alcohol plays as an enabling drug for other drug use and all the grievances that follows?
Sure.
Because people tend to go to alcohol and say
Yeah.
like,
Oh man.
you are my best friend,
Right. Oh,
goodbye.
we look, I mean, we try to numb the pain. We
Yeah,
try to anesthetize the pain. So I think that the questioner is right. I mean, I think alcohol, and I mean, I am not a teetotaler. I still drink, but I don't have an addiction gene. I'm
yeah,
able
yeah,
to stop. And, does that mean I've never been drunk? No, I've been drunk, and I don't want to do that again. I don't drink to get drunk.
yeah,
Um, and but alcohol, yes, is a major problem for people who are not able to handle it. And so, I teach at a lot of writers' conferences. A lot of what happens that's probably the most effective is at the bar, when we're talking to each other. And I try to encourage people who have a problem with alcohol, go there anyway, but have ginger ale because
mm,
there's still that social bond, that can happen, and you don't have to be drunk in order to, have a good conversation with someone. If you're an introvert, just ask questions and get to know someone that way. You don't have to
yeah,
be on, you don't have to be trying to figure out, well, what am I going to say? Just ask a question. Let the other person talk because people
yeah.
love to talk about themselves, as I've demonstrated here.
But the funny thing is also like people say, oh, alcohol they tends to open me up, and what a load of bull
No, it's
crap.
true. It really is true. It does
Yeah,
do that. It can do that. So does marijuana. I mean, I think that,
yeah,
the first time I smoked marijuana, I mean, I was much more, the barriers weren't there. I mean, one of the things that you talked about at the very beginning was breaking down barriers. And I'm not advocating marijuana, but for me, it really did break down barriers. The problem is I had no boundaries at some point, and I actually hurt people because of
yeah,
my
yeah,
behavior. So it's one thing to be kind of loosened up, and it's another thing to letting it control you to the point where you're impinging on other people's boundaries as well.
yeah.
So
But that
there's a
is
fine line. There's a fine
yeah.
line.
I'm a social educator, and then again, like because I'm a son of alcoholic, we always told our kids like you never know what the first sip of alcohol would do to you. You never
Right.
know what the first smoke, inhalation of marijuana or whatever. So if in doubt, just skip it, because you can be a much better person without, like, I
Yeah.
can not drink and be an idiot all the time.
Well,
It's just
there's a friend of mine who's in recovery, and she's been in recovery for at least 25, maybe even 30 years now. And she said that the tipping point was realizing, she said, that whenever I drink, it's like touching a hot stove. Well,
yeah,
we all know what it's like to touch a hot stove, which
yeah,
means that if alcohol is a problem for you, it's not going to be it's always going to be a problem. And so
yeah,
just assume, you can't manage it because you don't want to touch that hot stove. You know what happens. It keeps repeating itself. And so just don't touch the stove. Don't touch it.
yeah. John, time flies, as I mentioned, and we have been talking for an hour, and
I
I
know it.
know
Geez,
that we could speak for 3 hours, ten
we could.
hours, and
We
like
really could.
it's just like when you open up this subject, and please, just people, just if you are needing assistance or help or counseling, just do it. You will not perish. Like, it's better to go
Yeah,
and just check it out. and
yeah,
and your story, it is just as sad it is, but there are some learnings in it, and you just, but you keep on living, and you can, like, his passing means that you are teaching others to, like, take, like, we will never know what happens,
that's right.
as
If you don't
tragic it
mind,
is. Yeah,
if you don't mind, would you mind putting my email, my not email, my website up? Because if people want to get in touch with me, they can do it through my website, and they can,
well,
find out about my books there as well.
that was the next line.
Oh, I
You
didn't
were a
know.
little, well, I know what I'm doing. But it has been amazing, and I think
There it
that
is.
now we have here my friend again from Iceland. He says, like, thank you for a wonderful and inspiring conversation, but I feel we should do an inspiring conversation someday about alcohol and addiction. I gotta run. Cheers. Well, with whom am I supposed to talk to about addiction?
Oh,
I can't have
there are
a.
plenty. There are plenty of people who can talk about that.
Oh, you have a, like, you can't do that for me. Then you can find. Then I would love to talk to somebody who. But, well, I had the nun. She was in convent for 12 years, and then she got out. She was pushed out, and then she became an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what?
Right.
Well, she didn't know how to handle her liquor.
Yeah.
Well, she was Greek Italian, so I don't know if that had something to do with it.
Well, and you can see
Um,
my website on the bottom of the screen,
yeah, yeah.
johndedakis.com.
And it's just like, people, get in contact John via johndetakis.com. But of course, you are on LinkedIn, you are on YouTube. What was it? YouTube, LinkedIn,
Facebook.
Instagram, and Facebook. But the
Right.
main thing is your website.
Yeah.
And it's like, John, it's just has been amazing talking to you, and just your insights, and as heartbreaking they are, but it's just, this is what I mean about inspiring. Like, you have to be there, and you have to be empathetic, and you have to tell people and share your story.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. And I appreciate your sense of humor. This could have been a real downer. And to be honest, you got me crying there for a second, but that's okay. I really
Yes.
do. This is, human beings are complex
Yeah.
and dynamic. And I so appreciate the opportunity, for the podcast that gives people an opportunity to show their humanity.
So I thank you. And but before we leave, I just want to mention that in a week's time, I will talk to Stephanie Sylvestre about the confidence before capability, mentorship, intuition, and the human side of intelligent tools. Like, the conversations, they just turn longer and longer. Like, sometimes it's just. But as always, get in touch with John via his website. But people, just be curious, be interested, be inspired, and remember, it takes a whole village to work together for a better community. It's just,
You're not alone. You're not alone.
you are not alone. So just thank you really from the bottom of my heart, John.
Thank you, Ed.